In your view, what is the likely success and longevity of this coalition?
I think, and Labour people, I think, have to be careful about this because obviously they gleefully think this can't work and it's all going to fall apart in 9 months and hooray, we'll be back in the game. I'm not sure about that at all. It has quite a solid majority of around 80. Obviously, a lot of incentive, both on the Conservative and the Liberal Democrat side, to make it work. I suspect the trouble will come from both activists, who obviously have less stake in it in terms of power, and also those many backbenchers, both Lib Dem and Tories, who haven't got jobs and are disappointed, and managing them will be quite difficult. And then, of course, there's all sorts of unforeseen events. I mean, let's say a scandal happens. A scandal will happen involving a cabinet minister. It always does. Let's say it's a Lib Dem member of the cabinet, and David Cameron thinks he has to go, and Nick Clegg has a different view. I mean, there'll be scenarios thrown up like that, and we can't foresee how that will fold out.
Was a deal with Labour ever on the cards?
I don't think so, ultimately, because of the maths. I mean, I think the truth about this election is if Labour and the Liberal Democrats had got about 20 more seats between them at the election, we'd now be looking at a Lab-Lib coalition, if not under Gordon Brown, under another Labour figure. But the maths didn't work. And when it got to the point where you were contemplating having to rope in Scottish nationalists, of course, people like John Reid and Tom Harris erupted and said, we're not going to have this flimsy coalition with, plus, Alex Salmond holding a gun to her head saying, give us another billion or the coalition gets it. So I think the maths did for it.
I want to look at what struck me, for all of us talking about this, the audacity of David Cameron on the day after the election. And I would suggest, for discussion, that it was because he looked at the alternative. Yeah. If Labour and Liberals had done a deal, Tories would have been out of power, the boundaries wouldn't have changed, the electoral system would still be against them. The Progressive Coalition that Paddy Ashdown and Ming Campbell, Shirley Williams, Peter Mandelson, you name it, wanted, the consequences of not doing a deal with the Liberals were horrendous.
Well, I think there's that. And I mean, Mike will be very interesting on this. I think the Tory party has been haunted for years of the potential prospect that at some point or another, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats will get together and do a deal that might shut the Conservatives out for generations. Well, he's changed that whole strategic game by doing that. I think the other reason it was bold on his part and took people by surprise, he also looked at the other alternative, which is a minority Tory government trying to do tough decisions, then having another election 18 months, and said, actually, coalition, if I can pull it off, is going to be a much more successful and stable government than trying to do that.
I don't agree with you in the sense that I don't think the Labour-Lib Dem coalition really stood much of a chance, and not just because of the arithmetic, because it involved too many outrages. It involved keeping Labour in, who just lost the election. It involved keeping Gordon Brown for a few months, who just lost the election. It involved having an unelected Labour leader as Prime Minister, all those things. The most likely thing, I think, was that there would be a minority Conservative government. That was deeply unattractive because he would only have had time to start doing the cuts, then he would have had to go to the electorate again. What he saw was the possibility of changing British politics. He saw the opportunity of transforming the Conservative Party, the opportunity to have 5 years to do the cuts and then to go back to the electorate when he can show some signs of success. All of that was pretty inspiring. And I think a lot of this was worked out during the campaign, and I would wager that George Osborne did a lot of the thinking.
That they had thought this through even before they knew they hadn't won.
Yes.
I think there's also a bit of temperament in this. I mean, David Cameron strikes me as one of those people who quite likes to be the pivotal force balancing between two other sides. And his problem was the old moderate Europhile bit of the Conservative Party is withered away, and we've only really got Ken Clarke left as its representative. But you can just take the Liberal Democrats off the shelf and replace that with them, and then you can balance between them and your unreconstructed right, who would have caused you maybe a lot of trouble.
He's using them to decontaminate the brand.
Yes, yes.
And I would say uses the word. I mean, I'm surprised that Clegg took the deputy leadership without a proper portfolio. Everyone that does
It's not political reform, they say. No.
But you've got to have a proper department, otherwise it's a bit of a non-job. I think the Lib Dems are going to suffer most from this in the medium to long term.
Was there nothing Labour could have done?
In terms of putting together a coalition?
Well, given the result we had, was there nothing they could have done to stop this from happening?
No, because the numbers weren't there. A lot of us as MPs, both left, right and centre, thought, well, actually, we lost. And when you lose, you leave the stage gracefully. This idea to stitch together a coalition was driven by people who are not elected politicians.
Indeed.
That was the problem with it, and we knew we'd lost.
Mandelson being too clever by half.
But when I went into the House on Tuesday, I was surprised the number of MPs saying, this is nonsense, this can't work.
The coalition for the cuts,
yeah.
I mean, it has a plus and a minus. The plus is obviously that you're doing these cuts, unpopular, painful that they will be, with a cumulative vote of 60% of the electorate.
And you share the pain.
And you share the pain. The unknown is, does this coalition survive the cuts if the going gets really rough?
Yes, I mean, that will cause enormous strain, you can imagine, because we know, since the NHS is ring-fenced, that some departments are looking at real-term cuts of up to 20%, and that's going to cause enormous pain. And one of the great lies of the general election campaign, perpetrated by all the parties, was that this was all going to be done by efficiency savings and it wouldn't impact on a single frontline service. And we know, I know when in the New Labour boom years, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown had the most ferocious rows when they were spending more and more money about what should get what. So stand by for the blood when we were actually having to cut things.
You're saying Labour people think this won't last. You might be surprised the number of Tory MPs, what they're now calling themselves continuity conservatives, who are saying this won't last. So watch this space.
Well, there will be a number of Tory MPs who had hoped for preferment and didn't get it because Lib Dems had to be accommodated. But are they seriously trouble? Are they really a problem?
Well, I'm sure they're very upset. And, of course, when you look at the ratios, they are extraordinary. Because, 20 Liberal Democrats out of 50-something are ministers in the government. Or maybe I'm
Well, you're doing
right.
it on seat share. I suppose they'd say vote share.
Yeah, indeed. I am doing it on seat share. But, what they'll see around the House of Commons is that almost half the Liberal
there's going to be hardly any Lib Dem backbenchers
in the government. So that will be painful. But, it's a really big move to vote against the coalition, say, on a matter of confidence.
And it will also be quite a big move to muster all the anti-coalition forces. They are a vociferous bunch.
They are indeed a vociferous bunch. Now,
John Major found you don't need that many malcontents to make it very difficult to run your government.
Yes, but John Major didn't have a majority of 80, which is what Mr Cameron will have with Mr Clegg.
Yes, and you're in a new government rather than the fag end of one, where there is, certainly for the first 3 to 6 months, I think there's a lot of, half the House of Commons, or more than half, are new, and for a while, they're probably going to be quite pliable.
I don't want to look anymore at what the likely tensions are that could blow the coalition apart, because I would suggest the most likely tension is one we haven't seen.
Yes.
And it will be some kind of event that we haven't predicted. So, Diane, tell us about the mood in the Labour backbenches.
Well, we were relieved this Rainbow Coalition didn't happen because just in practical terms we thought it couldn't work. I went to the PLP we had a meeting with the Parliamentary Labour Party on Wednesday. Belatedly, every other group of MPs was consulted about coalition building except ours. And actually the mood wasn't bad at all. First of all, there are lots of us. Contrary to what people say, we did, at one point people were saying we'd be annihilated and we weren't. And people were pleased to see each other back because we didn't know whether...
What do you make of the new faces?
They're very young and nice and...
Is that a compliment or not?
That is a compliment.
So you hate them already?
No. We'll have to see how they work out. They'll have to see how they work out. No, the mood, we feel there was a point before the election where we really felt it was going to be 97 all over again and we're going to be wiped out. We were not wiped out and we do live to
You
fight
mean 97 in the way the Tories were wiped
Exactly,
out?
right, 97 in reverse.
Tell us about the state of the leadership contest. What kind of leadership contest is it going to be?
Well, it's going to be quite an amicable one because, quite frankly, there isn't...
It's not 83 then?
No, it's not 83.
It's not, is it?
There isn't a lot to choose between them. They're all male, they're all white, they're all former special advisors. And although people are trying to make up one is left-wing, one is right-wing, no.
But you're dancing on the head of a pin. One is a little bit more collectivist and one's a little bit more Blairite.
We know
but
that.
But it's not huge.
No, we know
they're broadly nuances. They would disagree about some things, but they're nuances, I agree.
Is, Andrew, you follow these things closely. David Miliband at the moment seems to be the front runner, partly because he's the one that's declared. But he also does seem to be the front runner against the likely candidates. For the moment, do front runners generally win?